All right, folks, happy Wednesday, 1 o'clock on the dot. We are ready to go. I see a few folks in here early. I started early and we had a couple of people come in early. Those are my people. Welcome. Let me know in the chat if you can hear and see me. If you're in the Zoom room, you should be able to comment in the chat. I've already unlocked the chat. And if you're over on Facebook, look for a comment below the post regarding today's training. There should be a link there to bring you into the Zoom. So if you're here and you're watching this live, come join us live right here in the Zoom, and you'll be able to engage with us in the chat. So, okay, I see that the chat was disabled. So everybody should be able to comment in the chat, and it'll be important today. My intention is to talk through our seller secrets and how we build rapport with sellers and some of the things that we do. And my hope is that we'll get some engagement from you all regarding things that you've seen work, things that you're doing that have worked in the past, things that you've done that unfortunately may have killed a deal or stalled a negotiation. And we're gonna do a little bit of back and forth. And today I'm gonna get us out of here in 30 minutes or so. Like I said, the other thing about this topic is I'm no Chris Voss, right? Never Split the Difference. If you know Chris Voss, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you don't, look him up and look up Never Split the Difference and read that book. But there is a whole world of negotiation education out there, right? And there are folks that are vastly better at this than me. What I believe we do incredibly well is build rapport with sellers, engage with people, and the negotiation comes later. So that's kind of going to be the theme that's going to drive our talk today. And like I said, encouraging you guys to engage in the chat. And again, I'm going to be respectful of your time. It's the middle of the day on a Wednesday. I want to get everybody out of here in 30 minutes today. So let's just jump right in and I'll share my screen. And you should see a quick deck that I put together, and I will make sure I have the chat off to the side so I could see any comments. So again, the theme is seller secrets, but what it's about more so than anything else, right? The secret is caring and listening to understand, right? We often listen with the intention of responding or fixing, right? We're looking to interject when someone says something. We're not actually listening to understand what it is that they're saying. We're listening only so long as it takes for us to get our word in, right? So, and I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we'll all admit that we could do better at that. And that's critically important when rapport building with sellers. And so seller secrets, I'm going to talk about 5 key pillars. Again, just keep in mind that while you're trying to go through the discovery phase, that's how we think about it. We're trying to build rapport, engage with the seller, be listening, right? Understand what they're saying. But at the same time, these are 5 boxes that we're trying to check off, right? Location, situation, their motivation, what are their and our expectations, and valuation, right? And they all flow. And I'm not suggesting that you go into a conversation with a seller with this checklist, right? And look to check each box. Let it happen organically, right? Let the conversation flow and build rapport, be listening. And if you're actually listening and you're asking a lot of the right questions, you're going to discover, like I said, the discovery part of the conversation, you're going to discover a lot of this long before any negotiation happens. And then when the negotiation happens, when the time comes to negotiate for the purchase, a lot of the front end work's already been done. And then the negotiation is just a formality. So that's been our experience. And I want to kind of impart a lot of that onto you guys today. So thinking about location. So again, we've set the frame, right? Like we're approaching this as a conversation. It's very relational. We're just there to kind of listen and understand. And it's not about the house. It's about where they're at in their lives. At the same time, here's like these 5 check boxes we kind of want to subconsciously be mindful of. So thinking about location, right? There's some things that are important to us. A lot of the location related stuff could be done remotely, right? You don't necessarily have to get to the house to do this. You could do a lot of this pre-work and then get to the house. Or if you're writing offers virtually, you'll have no choice but to do this remotely. And then you just kind of validate what you already saw online. So where's the property and what is impacting value? Like, what about the location is going to be a detriment to value? Is it in a subset of the town? Like, you've already qualified this market and now you've identified this opportunity in a town that you're actively farming, but is this in like a little niche neighborhood that's either better or worse than the rest of the town, right? Like, are these 6 or 8 square blocks more desirable because they go to a better school? Or are they less desirable because of a train or a bus or something like that, right? Or a cemetery, right? So think about the neighborhood, think about proximity to schools. Some folks don't like a house across the street from a school because they know that pickup and drop off is going to be intense and that they're going to be kind of handcuffed with getting in and out of their driveway, right? There's going to be a lot of traffic, or they don't want to be in proximity to commercial. They don't want people driving up and down all day trying to get to the convenience store at the end of the block, or whatever the case is. Is this particular property on or near a double yellow or like a busy road that's going to impact value negatively? You want to understand that. You want to be mindful of that. Power lines overhead or somewhere close by. These are all things that you want to be conscious of, and a lot, like I said, you could do before you get there. You get there and now you validate kind of what you already saw. And then noise, kind of the one that you need to be there for, is like, I don't actually see a busy road close on the map, but sound travels, and a few blocks away is a highway. And so you better believe that when you get out of your car and you pull up to this appointment, you're going to hear traffic, right? And then you got to determine, like, how loud is that traffic, and is that going to impact value in a significant way? So those are the kind of things you want to be mindful of when thinking about location. Like I said, this is one you could do a lot of before you get out into the field, right? So you don't necessarily have to be dependent on the in-person appointment to get a lot of this data, and you shouldn't. You should know a lot of this before you head out there. And then regarding the detriment to value piece, how positively or negatively some of these types of things will impact value, you're going to want to be conscious of. And so this is a resource that I'm happy to share with you guys for reference. So if you're interested in this resource, comment CMA in the chat, and we'll figure out how to get this over to you after the live. But essentially what this is all these different nuances, like the ones we just talked about on this slide, and how they would impact value at different price points. You're going to find something like this in your market. This is applicable mostly to our market, but what's important is the stuff off on the left-hand side. So you know that those are the kinds of things to be thinking about when you're looking at these properties, and knowing that they're going to have some sort of impact on value. These are worksheets and reference tools that appraisers use to make their determinations on value. So if you go out and you're going to borrow hard money to do this fix and flip, and you're projecting a $1 million ARV, and the thing happens to be, the project happens to be on a double yellow with power lines running over the top of it, you don't take that into account. Now the hard money lender sends out their third-party appraiser. He does this, he uses a tool just like this, and then adjusts your ARV accordingly, and you come in at 850. His after repair value appraisal is 850 when you're modeling $1 million. Why? Because you didn't catch that it's on a busy road. You didn't take into account that there's power lines nearby, or a school, or whatever the case is. So this is a great resource, and we're happy to share this with you guys. Again, you're going to want to find a version of this that's more market specific, and an appraiser or title partner will have these types of tools in your market. But again, be conscious of the far left column, not the numbers necessarily, just more so what the categories are, and then know that the categories impact different price points differently. That's what I want you to take away from this. But again, we're happy to share this with you guys offline. So I see a bunch of comments already, which is great. We'll get this over to you guys. So let's transition into situation. So what's going on and what's really going on are two drastically different things, right? What's typically going on is very surface level. It's the stuff they're comfortable telling someone they don't know over the phone. What's really going on is the stuff that the seller is willing to disclose when they're having a conversation with you, when you guys are getting personal, when they understand when they realize that you're listening to understand, right? That's when people tend to open up. And so what we find is that there's typically two situations at play, right? And they're not going to want to come out right out of the gate and share about either one, because financial, if there's something like regarding the economics of the home or payments or some sort of a default situation or something that's going on financially, there's going to be a lot of shame around that. And so that's not just something they're going to come out and tell you, right? There's that rare occasion where someone will, and they don't necessarily mind being forthcoming about that. But the reality is that most people are going to play that close to the vest. And if you build a rapport over the course of, minutes, tens of minutes, possibly an hour, at some point they may come clean. And that's when they're going to tell you that, like, listen, the situation, it's actually that I'm in pre-foreclosure, right? And that's why I have to move. You would likely know that. You could do a lot of that research in today's day and age. A lot of that's available online. But assuming you don't have that data, they are going to give it to you only if they feel like they're being understood. They feel like they're being heard, right? So financial, and then like familial, it's not that they're ashamed necessarily, but it's just something personal that people aren't in a hurry to tell you about. And so they might tell you that they need to sell their house and they need to do it fast, and that they want to get as much money as possible for it. But the situation might actually be that the son-in-law got a job in North Carolina and has since moved down there with their daughter and their grandson. And now they need to be closer to their family. And that's what's like the familial situation. That's actually what's prompting them selling and moving. And you wouldn't have gotten that unless you spent enough time there, right? Because they're going to stonewall you at, I need to sell this house. I want to sell it quick and I want to get as much money as possible. And I don't want to pay commissions, right? If you've ever been on a seller appointment, you've heard all that. That's the very canned response. So how do we go a little bit deeper? And how do we find out what the situation really is? What's really going on here? Because beneath the surface are the real answers. And they're typically one of two things. It's either financial or familial. So encouraging you, again, just go a little bit deeper, spend some time with them. Don't probe necessarily, let these things unfold organically, but that's only going to happen if they feel like they're being heard and you're making a conscious effort to actually listen. And that's a real world example, right? The example I gave you of someone saying, I need to sell quick. I don't want to pay commissions. I don't want to deal with realtors. Like, how much can you give me? And then over time, we find out that it's actually moving down to be closer to her grandson, who she really misses, who's been recently moved along with his dad because of a new job, right? These are the kinds of things you're not going to get this unless you're engaging these sellers. Now, let's talk about motivation. And so there's a lot of different motivations, right? If you do a search online, you'll find the 10 key motivations, the 8 personal motivations. Like, what we've found is when it comes to selling homes, there's essentially 4 basic motivations. And then I want to highlight the 5th thing, which is what's most important to you, right? We're listening, we're engaging with these sellers, we're trying to understand what's going on in their world. And then we come to find out that it's like, based on the situation, it's either financial or familial, but then what's motivating it on top of that, right? This is level 2. Is it like the career? Was it the son's career move? Is it their career move? Is it family? Maybe it's a blend of the two, like families since moved and they're the last, right? The last ones that stayed behind and now they're ready to finally move. Is it space? Like, have the kids gone on to college and now they realize they no longer need all that space, so they're ready to finally sell? Is it, we were talking about before, the neighborhood? Is it that the neighborhood's shifted in a way that they don't like, or is it that they want to be part of a HOA community? They want a new neighborhood. They want to be part of a neighborhood where everything is kind of taken care of for them. They no longer want like all the responsibility that comes with maintaining a house. They want to go from somewhere up north down to Florida and move into an HOA community where everything's kind of taken care of, and they have shared events and they have a clubhouse, right? So the neighborhood. And so what we're thinking as we're listening to all that is, well, how urgent is this? Like, based on these motivations, based on this situation that we're kind of unpacking, how motivated are they? What's the sense of urgency? Is there urgency? Because when there's urgency and scarcity, then there's an opportunity for us to buy at a discount, which as investors is what we're looking to do, right? If they're just looking to save on commissions, we're not the right buyer. Right? Those aren't the deals that are likely going to work for your model. But as an investor, if there's an opportunity to buy at a discount because they're especially motivated, because there's a sense of urgency, now we're talking, right? Like now we've kind of dug deeper and we've gotten something that we can work with. So when it comes to motivation, be listening to understand what it is that's prompting the move, but also be thinking about how urgent is this? Like, has their son and daughter moved 6 months ago, and are they dearly missing their grandchildren to the point where like they want to be there in 2 weeks? And if you can close quick, all cash, and get them like in a U-Haul moving in 2 weeks, like they're going to go with you. That's something we can work with. That's the urgency I'm talking about. And that's what I want you guys to be thinking about as you're listening to the sellers. And so we'll transition now into the expectation piece, and what are your expectations of them? More importantly, what are their expectations of you? And so if you were listening and you got clarity around the situation and you understand what their motivation is, now you should be able to fill that gap with a clean expectation that you can share and project, and something you can tell them that you can do, right? Like, how can I help you? Here's what I can do for you now that I understand where you're at and what's motivating you and what's prompting this move. That's going to be critically important. And then, of course, you have to do what you say, right? So in the wholesale world, if some of you on here are wholesalers, I don't know how many of you are, but if you're actively wholesaling, comment in the chat. I'm just curious how many are active wholesalers. And if your primary course of business is wholesale or fix and flip, drop a comment in the chat. I want to just kind of gauge the room. But so there's two kinds of wholesale, right? There's a wholesale who is going to be very transparent about what it is that they do, right? That's a proper wholesale, where you're going to be very clear with the sellers and you're not going to mislead them in any way. You're going to be very transparent. Then there's that wholesale model where you promise them the moon with the intention of finding someone else to assign to and never actually guaranteeing a sale. And that we do not advocate for. So if you're approaching the seller and you're finding out, here's their motivations, here's the situation, what they're expecting is that, like, I'm going to solve this problem for them, then you have to present yourself as the solution to the problem. And you have to present yourself as the solution if you intend to buy the house. Now, if you're not the solution, if you're the wholesaler who's going to bridge to the solution, then that should be clear as well. But what I'm encouraging you to do is to listen, understand what they're looking for, and then if you can, and only if you can, then meet that expectation and say that you will, right? I am a buyer. I can close in 2 weeks. All cash. You can leave behind anything you don't want. In fact, what we'll do is we'll actually have our demo partner put a dumpster in the driveway right away. And so as you're cleaning through things, you could just throw things into the dumpster already. You don't have to worry about leaving behind things that you're worried about or anything like that. Whatever's left behind, we'll take care of. But if we can make this process any easier for you, this is how we'll do it. Okay, so these are the kinds of things. So you can start to set expectations of yourself for them. And then, of course, like I said, you have to be able to honor those expectations. You have to be able to honor that promise that you make to them, that commitment that you make to them. So if your primary, it looks like a few of you are actually wholesalers and fix and flippers. So I'm getting like a mix in the chat. But I suspect if you're here, you're doing wholesale the right way. And so be very transparent with them. And if it's your intention to assign the contract, let them know that that's going to be your way of working to help them solve their problem. It's going to be bridging to someone who's actually going to buy the home. And you're going to make a spread for doing that, right? There's nothing wrong with saying that. When you're trying to do it on the sly is when things get a little bit hairy. And then what's your expectation of them? That they'll leave when they say they will, right? And I would say you make their lives easier, you solve the problem for them, and within reason, right? If they say, hey, I need some sort of a rent back, we're not sure we'll have a place. Okay, well, my expectation is that you guys will rent for 30 days, but you're going to be actively looking somewhere else. A lot of folks will help transition people out of the homes. They'll put time and effort and dollars into finding them somewhere else. So that's where there's this expectation exchange, right? And this needs to be spoken about. It needs to be clear. Like, we're going to take possession of the house 60 days from now. In the meantime, we're actually going to work with you to actively find you a place to go wherever it is that you're headed. And then we're going to make a connection with an agent who's active in that market, whatever the case is. So again, this is a byproduct of a lot of listening and a lot of really dialed in communication and rapport building. Montelli, great. Yeah. Ethical wholesaling gets more to the closing table. 100%, man. A lot of what's done that hurts us all is the unethical wholesale. It's the misleading of the sellers having this bad taste in their mouth because they were promised one thing by an investor who never had any intention of buying the home and got the contract at far too high of a price and then tried to sell it to someone like me. And there was no spread in it. So he couldn't find a buyer and he ultimately had to just default on the contract, or it expired after 30 days. And now this seller is left kind of holding the bag with no real clarity on what's next. And especially frustrated with anybody else that comes in behind that original investor. So they do, the unethical wholesaler does nobody any favors. So hopefully that's helpful. It gives you guys a little bit of insight on like how to approach this and how to manage the expectations on both sides. And here's the valuation piece. So by now, you've done a lot of the rapport building. You've engaged with these sellers. You're the solution to their problem because you finally listened and understood their problem, which nobody else did. And now you start talking about the numbers. I'll start with the last, and I'll go to the first. Like, never come out of the gate with your offer. They have to give you the first number. They absolutely have to. So just lock in there, anchor to that. And now, how do you get the first number out of them? Well, it's, hey, have you given any thought to what you might be looking to get out of the house, right? It's delivering it in a very open-ended way. And they might say, and they'll likely say, no, we don't know. Like, we don't know what it's worth. Well, they know what it's worth. I promise you that they do. In today's day and age, everybody has Zillow and can pull a Zestimate, right? And everybody knows what their neighbors' houses have been selling for. Everybody talks, right? It's just a matter of time before like that transaction up the street closed and makes it down like to your sellers. And they now know that the neighbor 2 blocks away got 550. And so they think they should get 550, even though their house is 20 years older and hasn't been touched. And the one up the street actually had the kitchen and the bathrooms redone. So this is where now you get to come in as the market expert. You get to tap like your access to the comps, your market knowledge. And also, if you're going to come in as a fix and flip investor, you also get to talk about what all needs to be done to get the value of the house where they believe it is. So again, never open with the number, right? Ask them where they think they ought to be. Like, you have any idea on where you'd like to be or what you'd like to get out of the house, right? Really open-ended questions like that. Eventually they'll give you a number. And now you start working from, okay, well, that sounds like a very retail number. And I see here that these 3 comps recently sold for that number, but that they're all updated and this and this and this were done. And so for us to do that, to get this house to 550, it would cost us this much. And now you're working away from that number and ultimately saying, you know what, I feel like I would need to come in somewhere in like the mid 3s to make this work for us, given the amount of work that needs to still take place. How does that sound? Are we even close? Or could you see yourself letting the house go for something like that? These are the way you approach the numbers piece. Again, if you've done everything else, if you understand location, if you've listened to understand what's going on with their situation, glean their motivation. Now you've set the expectation. The valuation part just naturally falls into place. So I'll just open up to questions. If anybody's got anything, my hope is that this takes you down the path of what conversations have I had? What did I do that went really, really well? Because the best way to do this is to log the reps and then to do a post-mortem and say, that really worked because of X, Y, and Z, or that didn't work because I said or did this. So if you're not doing this, if you're not doing these post-mortems on these conversations, the good and the bad ones, right? Like, go look at the ones that worked also, and look at the ones that didn't work out, the deals you didn't get that someone else got, because that means that the house was buyable, but you just didn't buy it. So in those scenarios, what could we have learned? And then you start logging the reps, making sure you're taking the right lessons away from the situations, right? Like if your lesson learned was that seller was unreasonable, but the investor that came in right behind you bought the house, clearly that's not the right lesson to learn there, right? The lesson is I missed something that other investor saw. And so what was that? What's the lesson then? So how can you guys get better at that? How can you develop your seller communication skills? How can you become a better listener? There's books for days on this. Like I said, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Anything Chris Voss has ever done, interview-wise, public speaking-wise, go watch that. It's going to give you a lot of insight. But at the end of the day, it's about building relationships. It's about listening to understand. And then once you get clarity on what it is that they're looking to achieve, become that problem solver for them. And like I said, the value, the number, the purchase price, all that works itself out. We don't have time on these calls to go deeper and talk about always making 2 offers, doing the seller financing, version, and then the all cash version. We just don't have the time to go deep on that type of stuff here. We do that stuff offline all the time. In fact, part of what's prompting today's talk and this theme is the call we had last night with the accelerator, where someone had asked a question about filling out a contract and talking to a seller. And my intention was to do something along these lines. And then I said, oh, let's just dial it in and let's just talk about the abstract. Let's talk about the relational part of this, the stuff that's often neglected, that people don't pay attention to, right? They just want to blast out offers. And so there's a place for the spray and pray approach, right? The cast a wide net approach. There's a place for that too, but there's also a place for this very relational, appointment driven, like seller rapport building type of approach. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you guys some additional clarity. I'll jump out of my screen share now, make sure my chat window is still up. Any questions regarding any of this, drop them in the chat. In the meantime, we'll look back through anyone that's commented. We'll get you over that reference tool. Again, encouraging you, if you're not in our market, that tool is only so helpful. You're gonna need to go find an appraiser or a title partner in your market that's got a version of that applies to your market. So you could really dial in your comps. But you need to just log reps. At the end of the day, this is about logging reps. This is about doing these postmortems after you have these conversations. Talk to a lot of sellers, go see a lot of houses, especially if you're early in your journey and you haven't yet bought a lot of houses. Go in there and start developing your style. Like, what's your narrative? What's your story? How are you going to differentiate yourself from the investor before you and the investor after you, right? Try and get in there first, try and build rapport early, try and earn last look, right? Ask for it, but earn it. Say, hey, here's where I think I'd be at, but given what we've talked about, but I'd love an opportunity to see where this shakes out and maybe match your best offer, right? Like, these are the kinds of things that you can do to give yourself a leg up. Our narrative, our story, and how we approach these conversations with sellers is going to be different, right? Like, a second generation home builder who leans on construction, that's my narrative. That's kind of like my story. That's how I approach it, right? I'm going to be able to identify a lot of things in the home from a construction standpoint that need a lot of work. And so I'm not going to pick the house apart, but I'm going to start doing some maths and then sharing those numbers with them when we get to the valuation piece, when we get to the offer piece. If that's not necessarily your giftedness, that's not your unique set of skills, you lean into what is for you. Some people are incredible empaths, right? They're just extroverted and they're very empathic. And so that's yours. That might be your gift. And you might be able to just build incredible rapport with the seller and understand what's going on at a level that I cannot, because I'm not an empath, right? So just think about like where your giftedness lies, what your unique style is going to be, and then start logging reps and start developing that style. And you'll ultimately be incredibly successful with the writing offers and getting contracts. I promise you that. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. We're at the 30-minute mark as intended today. Like I said, this was going to be a short one. If you want to go deeper on any of this stuff, just drop a comment. Actually, drop a comment over in the Facebook group. If you want to learn more about what we're doing in the accelerator, comment there. We'll reach back out to you. We can talk to you about what we're doing in that group. And in the meantime, everybody that's commented CMA, we're going to hit you guys back up and get you over a version of that document for reference. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Happy Wednesday. Keep crushing this week. I'll see you guys back in the group next week. And thanks again for your time.